Welcome to the Art of Healing podcast, the podcast that is dedicated to helping you connect with your mind, body, and spirit. This is Charlize, physician and Reiki master, and thank you so much for joining me. I would like to remind you that although I'm a physician, the information you receive in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. You can find my full disclaimer at my website, www.healingartshealthandwellness.com. If you like what you hear on this podcast, sign up for my weekly newsletter. Check your show notes for more information and for the link to sign up. Thank you. This podcast episode will be discussing medically related issues. I would like to remind you that although I am a practicing physician, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. This is not medical, mental, or religious advice. This is not legal or financial advice. And it is your responsibility to pursue medical care as recommended. Please see my website for further information on this disclaimer. Thanks. Hello, and welcome back to the Art of Healing podcast. This is Charlize. Thank you so much for joining me. For today's episode, I am going to cover Reiki as a lifestyle of resilience. Reiki as a lifestyle of resilience. As I was deciding what I wanted to record for this episode, and just like everyone else, the ongoing saga of 2020 continues, where most days you think you know what to expect, and then you quickly learn that you're going to shift gears, change channels, regroup pretty quickly to get through your day. For me personally, and if you have looked at any of my other information online, I am a practicing physician. I practice internal medicine. The day-to-day of treating patients changed. Thankfully, I was able to keep doing my job one way or the other, virtually or in person. And the ongoing pandemic, I felt the effects a multitude of ways, from my own patients to myself being tested for coronavirus after developing some mild symptoms. And thank goodness I was negative. To seeing the effects it has had on the family members of my patients. But most recently, my brother has been hospitalized with a severe illness, and it's been during his hospitalization that I've really felt the effects of how Reiki as a lifestyle can be truly beneficial, and why I feel so inspired to share this with others and try to offer an avenue for others to add this to their lifestyle. Before I became attuned to Reiki, before I became a Reiki practitioner, like most people, I dealt with stress one way or the other. I like to exercise, I like to go to the gym, but I would say for definitely the first 35 years of my life, I had sort of a concept inside of me that I knew there was a certain amount of stress, adversity that I could take, and there was sort of this internal tank that I had that could fill up to a certain point. I actually had, a feeling of what filled the tank, sort of my, life, energy, whatever, what would rejuvenate it and what would deplete it. what would deplete this internal sort of tank of energy reservoir. And as long as things were going well, it was pretty easy to go through this cycle of refill, empty. And just like with anyone else, things that would empty the tank would be my, stress with my job, interpersonal stress. Prior to becoming attuned to Reiki, I was in a relationship that ended abruptly, took a big hit on me. But even before it ended, I often would feel this relationship was a source of drain. But then it could also refill the tank. So I would go through this cycle endlessly for years of refill, drain, refill, drain. Once I became attuned to Reiki, this concept was completely turned upside down. For those of you that practice any sort of energy work or spiritual work, or just have anything that renews you that comes from a source that's not you, from beyond, from a higher source, I no longer needed this sort of tank. It just stayed filled. And I personally noticed my resilience, my tolerance for adversity exponentially grew. Not that I would ever consider myself a whiner, but again, I knew I had sort of a set point of so many things I could tolerate for so many aspects of life until it got depleted. And once I was depleted, I actually knew I'm going to get sick, going to get a cold, going to get the flu. I'm going to injure myself. I remember in residency, when I was a second year resident, and it was, let me correct myself, it was towards the end of my residency. I was working in one of the most stressful environments was ICU. And like most training physicians, I was thankful to be there, but definitely, I think it was winter months, it was dark, it was a very busy unit. This is going many years back, so this is nothing in comparison to what it would be now during the pandemic. But it was a, difficult time, a lot to learn medically, emotionally very stressful. So I live in the Midwest. We had an incoming ice storm coming. And basically what happened, it had been very stressful several days. And at the time when I was in residency, days off, you didn't really get that many days off, usually once a week. But I had concern that we had incoming weather. We started our rounds very early. I brought up to our attending physician that I think we should try to delay when we started rounds, keeping in mind that I didn't feel it would impact the patients to delay. I had already heard throughout the hospital that many of the services our patients would be needing would be delayed. So thinking of the safety of the medical team, if we could start a little later, what resulted? And when I say this, please keep in mind, I have no anger, nothing like that. And I totally see that the person that did this was, going through his own things. The attending physician proceeded to assault me verbally for several minutes. But the key is, keep in mind, in my podcast and throughout my blog and everything, I discuss medicine. There are many websites I'll discuss some of the toxic environment of medicine, and I have been through it. But this attending physician spent several minutes berating me verbally, screaming, yelling. Oddly enough, and I say this with a smile face, I'm laughing, I was not necessarily affected. I had sort of gotten used to his temper tantrums. And as he did it, when I recall my memory, I think I actually kept writing some of my notes. It was a fairly bizarre moment. However, I think once it was done and the rest of the team was concerned and thought I was upset, I was like, no, I'm fine. Let's keep going and seeing our patients. But at least at that time, I felt like I had recovered from that toxic exchange. I remember leaving. The storm had already started coming in, so my commute home was quadruple the time it normally took. And then once I got home, I rested, slept, ate, got up to go in the next day. And getting up that morning, I remember my stress levels were the highest. The weather was the worst. It was the coldest. And even worse, I knew there were sick patients and a team that needed me there. And needless to say, my tank that I ran on was emptied out. And I fell and injured myself, ended up with a fracture in my leg. And that was my first taste. It was in my 20s, it was many, many years ago, of what it's like to run that tank out. Now, since having learned some self care and learning that self care is beyond a hobby, it's a necessity, which I started with yoga training, actually formally training yoga, then learning Reiki. That I'm learning that it's so much easier not to have to depend on my own inner supply, to just simply tap into a higher source, um, let that tank never run empty, just let it fill up, and I can immediately bounce back and come back. So before I became attuned to Reiki, I definitely dealt with feelings of anxiety um, most of the time. And I don't say I don't deal with them now, especially during 2020. But the one thing that I notice is that having something like an energy medicine technique like Reiki, um, and being more in tune with my own energy, my own feelings, I can feel my anxiety coming before it gets there. So much so that I never really have to go through it. Um, I can feel changes in my own energy body. I can start working on myself. Um, and oftentimes what I do now is I have, others I may work with that I will prepare to, get myself a session. And about as soon as I think I'm going to, probably run myself too low, I'm able to turn it around just by doing Reiki sessions on myself. My favorite is to do them at night, sometimes in the morning, or even during the day, maybe just a 3-minute, 6-minute, or a 9-minute session. Um, One of the biggest things I notice, which a lot of people learn Reiki to heal physical um, injuries, and it helps. Even if you suffer, it's just something mild like an ankle sprain, if you are attuned to Reiki, you can treat it yourself. And the way that I think of it depends on the depth and the severity of the injury. So Reiki may not have enough juice to necessarily turn that around, but maybe it will. But it can definitely help mitigate what you're going through. For something like ankle sprain, you cut yourself. Of course, using Reiki on more serious chronic conditions helps in a number of ways, which at some point I think I'll cover. It helps you tune into why it's happened, what's happened, to get into deeper levels to actually start to heal yourself. Um, and the biggest thing with the Reiki as a resilience lifestyle is increasing my personal intuition. Um, my Reiki clients often say that I'm psychic, and I often tell them I am not psychic. Um, I do think there are people who are very gifted, that are born with it, that can see and sense and feel things beyond their normal human sense organs. I don't, but I think what they pick up, and actually my medical patients often think that I've have used some sort of superpower. It's the way I describe it is the inner peace that I have from having a Reiki practice and from um, using it so much that it becomes sort of a minute to minute thing throughout my day, is that I can tune in and quiet my own thoughts enough that other information comes forward and comes forward rapidly. And then it tends to make my life easier. Um, this helps when you're dealing with your family, especially when they're upset. So I know in my own family, with our recent, having a member in the hospital, that's been difficult. And when treating my own patients, if my patient's particularly upset, they're suffering, they're having a very difficult time, knowing that I can make space for them, I can quiet my own emotions and allow them to express themselves, helps them in ways beyond, and allows me to operate in their care in ways that I never could have before. being attuned to Reiki. The way I sometimes see that is I know some physicians will feel drained or feel like patients drain them. And now that I am Reiki attuned to Reiki master and I've used it with enough practice, this doesn't happen to me. This doesn't happen. I don't worry about patients depleting my emotional, physical, or spiritual energy. I don't want to sound overly confident, but again, I think it's just being attuned to when I meet someone, the amount of suffering they're going through, understanding a few energy medicine techniques, that there's no need for me to kind of go down the path of suffering with them. If I'm going to help them, I need to stay strong in where I'm at. And I think for my final reasons that Reiki can be a lifestyle of resilience is in addition to just helping you cope during difficult personal times, it definitely helps me to tune in my work environment. It's easier to work with staff, easier for me to work with my colleagues because of understanding and just having just a little bit better of intuition, which I'm tuned into myself, that I don't worry or feel the need to respond or see anyone's issues, responses, or anything as anything towards me personally. Going back to my previous example, at the time that happened, I was a resident, I was much younger, but I understood just a little bit that at the time the attending that did that must have been very stressed. So I didn't honestly take it personally, although it was very, personally slung at me. But when I revisit that now, and especially understanding energy medicine, the environment we're working in, the stress we were under, the stress my attending must have been feeling, I have a much more complete understanding of why he would have lashed out. I don't know because ironically, after that event, I never actually saw him again because of my injury. I was out of work for 4 weeks. I did always wonder, if he interpreted or if he worried, but don't matter. It doesn't matter. Because at the time I don't, and I know it wasn't towards me personally. It was just the environment, how we were working, the limitations, the illness, the suffering that we were in, the people that were very, very sick and dying. And finally, one of the nice things about this Reiki as a resilience lifestyle is your role in your family as a parent, a sibling, a child. It allows you to have the personal resilience so you can be more present for others. I don't have kids. I do have pets. And I also practice animal Reiki. Theme that's been coming up a little bit more frequently than usual is Reiki for animals. But I'll tell you, many times it's not always the animal that needs it, because I think if you're a pet parent, you agree that they're pretty much celestial angelic beings that are made pretty perfect. They might do little things that get you here and there, but they're very different from us energetically, emotionally. But a lot of times it's the owner that's carrying some issues, some heavy energy. And because of the role our pets will play in our life, they will sacrifice themselves to carry that energy for you. So when it does come up, sometimes I'll will wonder, and if this, if it's appropriate, if it's allowable, I'll recommend the owner, do you want a session of Reiki? Because while it may be the animal definitely may have past trauma, especially if it was a sheltered animal, rescued, something like that. I'm going to always wonder if maybe the owner is having some suffering that the pet is simply caring for them. So as a resilience lifestyle, which as we move forward and as we get closer to even more stressful events, as the election and just so many things going on, I don't think that it's a terrible idea to think about what you can have to help yourself. Reiki is a modality I know some of yoga. I'm a practicing physician, So I'm not saying it's the only path. It's just the topic that I'm comfortable with, that I know. But I do hope for yourself you'll find something, if it's your prayer circle or just however you find that to help refill you so that you don't feel drained. Because the one thing we're learning in 2020 is, as we go through whatever we're going through, this worldwide global transition, change, rapid change, uncertainty is now kind of our normal. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for your time with me. I value it. I hope this is helpful. As always, you can find me at my website, healingartshealthandwellness.com. I am also on Instagram, and you have to forgive me. I always say I'm not the most tech savvy, but I know I'm on social media, but I can't ever remember those handles. But thank you so much for listening, and hope we can interact soon. Thanks. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Art of Healing podcast. Once again, this is Charlize. You can find out more about me at www.healingartshealthandwellness.com. Did you know I have a blog as well as online courses? Check your show notes to sign up for more information about healing arts, health, and wellness. Thank you. Please feel free to share this episode with your friends, family, and loved ones.